He didn't raise a lover. He cultivated dependence. From the outside, he looks like a powerful man protecting the woman he wants. But from a deeper angle, this is a story about control disguised as care, desire disguised as destiny, and violence disguised as devotion. She believes she is choosing him, yet every move around her has already been shaped by power, fear, and emotional manipulation. And the most disturbing twist is not the pregnancy or the kidnapping. It is the possibility that the man who rescued her may have engineered the conditions that broke her first.
And listen to this plot twist. She hid everything. The night, the feelings, even the kid. Alessia thought she could just dip, leave zero trace behind. But he cornered her, all predator-like, and basically said, "You're not going anywhere." Then he hit her with the final blow. "This baby is mine." That's when she knew she was never in control. My name's Alessia, and this is where it all goes down. Chapter 1. The red flag she sprinted past. The day was perfect, too perfect. Great coffee, clear skies, total trap. The blazer was sharp, the contract was signed the day before. We're talking double the salary for a job she wanted for 2 years. Office is a 20-minute drive. She's walking out, portfolio in her bag, thinking life is finally clicking into place. First call goes to Lorenzo. It's always Lorenzo, her ride or die since they were 12. He's the first person she tells anything to, good or bad. It's their thing. Some habits you just don't break. And that one habit never seemed like a problem. He picks up on the second ring, standard for her. "I got the job," she says, no small talk needed. "Signed yesterday, Viscari Holdings." Then silence. A full 3 seconds of it. She can feel the tension because she knows her brother. This ain't a happy pause. "Viscari," he says back, and the name sounds toxic coming from him. Viscari Holdings. "Yeah," she confirms, already feeling a chill. "You know them?" He replies, "I know the owner." And bam! His voice gets dead serious, a tone Lorenzo only uses when crap's about to hit the fan. No panic, no drama, just the calm voice of a guy dropping a nuke. He'd rather not. "Spill it," she orders, so he does. Not the whole story, she realizes way later. He held back, told her just enough so she wouldn't bail on the job immediately. But it was plenty. Dante Viscari, 35 years old, basically the king of an empire that makes his CEO title look like a joke. This guy's power isn't on paper, it's in the whispers and problems that just disappear. He's one of the most respected dudes in the Mafia. A total player. He doesn't collect numbers, he collects moments and never has the same woman in his bed twice. "Alessia," Lorenzo says, and she knows that tone. He's trying to get through to her. "This man is going to see you." His type always does. She just laughs. Not a mean laugh, just the sound of a little sister who's heard her bro overreact for 15 years straight. I mean, Lorenzo banned her from riding a bike at 13 and was sure she'd get lost on the subway at 18. The guy sees danger everywhere. "Lorenzo," she says, super patient. "I'm an executive assistant. I'll be doing schedules and reports." He shoots back, his voice dead level, which is way scarier than yelling. "You'll be walking into his office every single day." "I'm going to do my job," she insists. There's a line. For you, there is. For him, maybe not. She goes quiet for a second. Not 'cause he convinced her, but because his dead certain tone hit a nerve she didn't want to admit was there. Lorenzo wasn't being dramatic. He was being precise. "You're making me scared of a guy I've never even seen," she says. "I'm preparing you," he fires back. Then he pauses, letting the weight sink in. He doesn't flirt like a normal dude, he doesn't need lines, he just uses his presence. You'll feel it before you even know what it is. And by then it's way too late. She wanted to call BS, Tell him she's a grown woman who can handle some boss with a rep. And she tried to, with all the confidence of someone clueless. It's not about being interested, Lorenzo cut her off. It's about how he operates. You could be totally uninterested and it'll still get to you. They're not connected. The line went dead quiet. The sun was getting higher, the street noise louder, and her grip on her phone was way too tight. "Promise me you'll call if anything feels off," he asked. His voice was pure Big Brother mode, all protection, zero judgment. She takes a deep breath and tells him her honest-to-God truth at that moment. "I promise I won't feel anything at all." And she meant it. No irony, no ego, just pure, blissful ignorance she'd regret later. Then she calls Sophia, who freaks out with excitement and plans a party. She doesn't mention Lorenzo's warning. She just shoves it away and rolls on, hyped for her new life. She wasn't wrong about the new chapter. She was just dead wrong about what was on the other side of that door. 10 floors up, Dante Viscari was looking at her resume. Standard procedure. He didn't even finish it, just closed the folder and tossed it. Then he sat there, staring out the window. Marco, his boy, later said it was the only time he had no clue what the boss was thinking. Chapter 2. The meeting. The Viscari Tower was all glass and steel, screaming, "I'm better than you." The receptionist checked her name, made a badge, and then paused. "Good luck," the receptionist whispered, with a plastic smile that didn't reach her eyes. You know the type, polite but cold. Alessia clipped on the badge and headed for the elevator, feeling like those 2 words were a massive warning sign. The 10th floor was silent, not empty, just that creepy quiet where everyone talks in whispers. Other assistants stared, probably betting on how long she'd last. She knocked on his door, walked in, and froze. Dante Viscari didn't even look up. He just sat there, pen in hand, but she could feel him watching her. He knew. This wasn't him being busy. This was a power move. He was making her feel the weight of the room before he'd even say hi. She stood by the door, counting 45 seconds of pure rage, knowing exactly what he was doing, long enough to smell the expensive furniture and get that he didn't need to speak to run things. Then he slowly lifted his head. No rush. His eyes locked onto hers. This wasn't a boss checking out a new hire. This was a man who found something interesting and planned to take his sweet time with it. Something inside her just went off. A gut reaction she couldn't stop. And right then, Lorenzo's warning popped into her head. "He's going to see you. His type always does." She straightened up. She decided right there this dude would never see her sweat. She'd be professional, efficient, a total brick wall, whatever it took. "Romano," he said. His voice was low, sharp, every word hitting its mark. "Yes," she replied. "Set." It wasn't a suggestion, it was an order. Straight up a command, not an ask. You could feel it in the air, in how he sat, in that stare that never left her. She sat down, opened her laptop, sat out her folder, and clicked her pen. All the usual meeting moves. Then she looked him dead in the eye, 'cause no way was she backing down now. He just watched her, completely still, and it started to get under her skin. "You've reviewed the job description," he stated, not asked. Nah, he wasn't asking, he was stating a fact. "I have," she shot back, "and I've already prepped a summary for week 1. If you want to see it." But he cut her off cold. "Unnecessary," he clipped. "I know the priorities." Then he just turned back to his paperwork, discussion over. She held his gaze for half a beat, her one tiny act of rebellion, then fired up her laptop. The battle lines were officially drawn. And the biggest insult was him pretending there wasn't even a war, or worse, knowing there was and writing her off as a scrub. The morning flew by as she got the office rhythm down. At 11, he called her name without looking up, but she already had the document in his hand. He scanned it, the pause stretching just a bit too long. Correct. But then she caught it. His gaze flickered to her, intense and anything but professional, before snapping back to the page. He wasn't even trying to hide it. Suddenly it hit her. Her boy Lorenzo wasn't exaggerating. This guy saw her. And the truth bomb she wouldn't admit until later was that she had seen him too, and there was no going back. Chapter 3. The Forbidden Vibes. The first 2 months were a total Cold War, a battle she was in before she even got the memo. It all kicked off with that first look, that first order, and the sketchy meetings that never hit the calendar. Last-minute summons with mysterious men who would just disappear. Slowly, the whole Dante Viscari is just a CEO story fell apart. A name, Srokin, popped up on a document that landed on her desk by mistake. She had no clue who that was, but the way Marco snatched that paper back, his eyes screaming, "You saw nothing," told her everything. This was a name you do not mess with. So she set her own rules, the only ones that mattered. Be professional, be a beast, be untouchable. She had to, once she figured out this office was a front for some serious business. With all the secret meetings and code names, she built a fortress of pure skill. She turned in work early, handled his requests before he made them, and cleaned up messes no one else would touch. This was a power move, for her, not for him. His standards were insane, absolutely brutal, like a guy who deals with life or death consequences. If her work was trash, he'd say so. But when she absolutely killed it, his silence was deafening. Oh, he noticed. She could feel it. If he were just a demanding jerk, she could have handled it. The real problem was his focus, the way he clocked everything, not on a whim, but with terrifying calculation. He never reacted, he only decided. And he watched her with the same laser focus she used on him, blowing him out of the just a boss category. By the end of month 1, the little things started to pile up, trapping her before she could even play dumb. It began with the coffee. She had a ritual, small, black, no sugar, every single day. Then, one Monday, she walks into the break room and bam, a coffee is waiting for her. Her name on it in his sharp, no-frills handwriting. She just stared at it for 3 whole seconds before Carla from finance floated by and muttered, "Welcome to the club." She didn't bother asking. She just grabbed the coffee and said nothing. He said nothing. But every morning after that, the coffee was there, exactly how she liked it. It was a small thing, sure, but small things have a way of building into something huge. The next clue was a green dress. She only wore it on days she needed to feel like a warrior. It had a way of demanding attention without ever making a sound. She put it on one Thursday in their second month for a huge presentation needing to feel unstoppable. Dante canceled the 11 o'clock meeting. No reason given, he just stayed in the office all day. And all day long, his stare was different. It wasn't more obvious, but it was heavier, like someone cranked the intensity dial up a secret notch. It was in his gaze, holding hers for a split second too long. It was in the tiny hesitation after he said her last name. A pause with no logical purpose. It was in the air between them at his desk, a space that felt charged, electric. She dodged the green dress the next week. It took her 2 more to admit why. The third sign completely shattered her defenses. At the end of that second month, there was a dinner with some partner executives. Her job was to be invisible, the perfect assistant. The night went off without a hitch until some exec, around 50 and way too many drinks in, mumbled something gross as she walked past. She didn't hear the words, but she knew the type. The very next morning, Dante terminated the company's entire contract with the guy. The official memo, typed up by Marco, blamed long-term strategic divergences. Corporate nonsense, everyone pretended to believe. And Marco Vitali, who'd been watching them like a hawk from day one, actually smiled. A quick, knowing smirk. Marco didn't hide it or flaunt it. He just let it hang there, which was basically a novel's worth of gossip coming from him. She found out about the canceled deal from a stray email. For a hot minute, she just stared at her screen, a new feeling taking over, something wild she couldn't control. It was a mix of warmth and pure dread. That night, she called Lorenzo, feeding him the usual story about work. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I'm fine," she lied. The real story was for Sophia. It was always for Sophia, who never judges and never ever says, "I told you so." Sophia just listens, breaks it down, and then hits you with the brutal truth. By month 3, the office Cold War started to thaw. The vibe had totally shifted. You could feel it in the silence after hours, a charge in the hallway when he passed, a weight in the air between his words. It was a constant radar of where he was in any room. An instinct told her when he was getting up, when he was getting close, when he was lingering by her desk just a little too long. It was the way he said her last name, Romano. From him, it wasn't just a name. His voice had a tone that was definitely not a work summons. It was like saying her name was a line he was crossing on purpose, slow and steady, like a man who knows he's going to win. Her only defense was to act like she didn't notice. Then came a perfectly normal Wednesday afternoon until it wasn't. She was at the conference table setting up papers for the next day. The office was emptying out, leaving that tense silence that hangs around after people are gone. The lights were dim, the building was quiet, and she was totally focused on a screwed-up report. Then she heard it. Dante's office door opening. She knew his footsteps instantly, the cadence, the weight, the steady pace. Her brain had been tracking these details for weeks without permission. The footsteps came toward the bookshelf behind her. The room was huge. He could have taken a dozen other routes. But he walked directly behind her, and in a move she can replay frame by frame, his hand grazed her back. The lightest touch, just fingertips on her hip for less than 2 seconds. It could have been an accident, except for the way his pace slowed down for that one tiny instant before picking back up. It was no accident. They both knew it. She stood up slowly, the heat of his touch exploding through her like an intruder that wasn't planning on leaving. So get this. He was already on the other side of the room, flipping through a folder like absolutely nothing just went down. Total stone-cold operator, broad shoulders, precise movements, giving nothing away. The quiet between them suddenly had a whole new vibe. She wrapped up her work, moving like one wrong twitch would unleash a truth she wasn't ready for. She grabbed her stuff, her bag, and walked straight out. No looking back, because that was the one thing she couldn't let herself do. That touch burned for hours, a ghost of heat she carried all the way to the restaurant where she finally broke down and told Sophia. It just slipped out, the way huge secrets do with the right person. "He touched me," she said. Sophia slammed her glass on the table. "How?" "On my back when he walked past." Alesia picked up her wine, moving with extreme care. "Alesia," her friend said. using that tone for a truth so obvious it's painful. A guy like that does nothing by accident. She knew it the second it happened, with that crystal clear certainty that only hits at the worst time. But hearing Sophia say it out loud made it real, a fact she'd been fighting for hours. And then what? Sophia pushed. And then nothing, she said. He's my boss. Sophia just stared at her, a million things to say, trying to figure out where to even start. For now, she finally said, and signaled for more wine. Chapter 4: The Dangerous Game. By month 5, Dante's professional act was starting to wear thin. Not in any obvious way she could report, but in a way she felt in her bones. She'd spent way too long decoding this guy's silences to play dumb anymore. It kicked off in the elevator. They got in together on a Thursday. A meeting had run late, and the air was thick with post-work tension. Just them. He hit the button for the ground floor, the door sealed shut, and the tiny box suddenly felt like it was closing in. She stood there, eyes locked on the doors. He was standing behind her. His cologne hit her first. Wood, amber, and some other note she couldn't place but had mentally catalogued weeks ago without permission. She stared at those doors, using her focus as a shield, but a part of her knew that shield was about to get obliterated. 3 floors to go. He moved closer, 1 centimeter, just one. But in that small space, that heavy silence, 1 centimeter, was the difference between professional distance and a whole new map. "You wear this dress on purpose," he said. His voice was so low she felt the rumble on her neck before she heard the words. It wasn't a question. It was a final verdict, dropped with the chilling calm of a man who's already figured it all out. She didn't turn. Facing the doors, she shot back in the flattest voice she could manage. "I wear what I want." "I know," he replied, letting a beat pass before dropping the bomb. "That's what bothers me." The doors slid open. She strode out like she had somewhere important to be. And only when she was safely around the corner, out of his sight, did she finally let out the breath she'd been holding since the 3rd floor. He waited 2 full seconds before he stepped out of the elevator. She didn't see him do it, but she knew. Same way she could always pinpoint him in a crowded room, she knew he was still, and she knew exactly what those 2 seconds meant. The trip to Milan was booked for 2 weeks later, a schedule jam-packed with meetings, a logistics plan she'd organized perfectly, and separate suites on the same hotel floor. She felt a wave of relief seeing that detail, then got annoyed at her own relief because it meant she'd considered the alternative, and that was a mental road she refused to go down. The first day was a brutal technical grind. During one meeting, she caught a huge error in an exec's numbers before anyone else, and she spoke up. The whole room went dead silent. Dante turned to look at her. He didn't smile, but his eyes gave her a look she filed away instinctively. That night, she was at the hotel bar, laptop open, with the real intention of working for another 2 hours. Simple dress, hair down, a glass of wine as a small treat. And then he was there. He sat down beside her, not across. His arm was inches from hers, his presence a wave of heat that showed up before he even spoke, like always. "The work is done," he said. "I know," she answered and shut the laptop. Just like that. No fight, no questions, a lack of resistance that totally freaked her out. She decided not to overthink it because thinking would make her leave, and she wanted to stay. That was the ugly truth. They stayed in that bar for an hour and a half. He didn't say much, but what he did say was real. A world away from the corporate talk and meetings. He mentioned his childhood in Milan, a short, almost accidental slip, like a word that escapes before you can stop it. She soaked up every single detail with the focus she'd been trying to kill for months, but which was on high alert that night. As she got ready to leave, his hand covered hers. It was a slow, deliberate move with zero pretense. She looked down at his hand, at his fingers over hers with a quiet weight that wasn't force but pure presence. The kind of weight that comes from pure intention, not from strength. And she didn't move her hand. "You're different," he said. It was a statement of fact, no romance, no slick lines, just a direct observation like he was reporting verified data. "You say that to all of them," she fired back, her gaze still fixed on his hand. "I don't say anything to all of them," he replied. And she believed him, instantly. No doubt, no need for proof, just that gut feeling when your body knows the truth before your brain even gets the memo. She believed him, and that truth was exactly what scared her to death. She got back to her room, her heart pounding a rhythm she refused to analyze. She called Sophia, who let out a shriek so loud she had to pull the phone away from her ear. Her friend told her she deserved one night, just one. It didn't have to be a big deal. Tomorrow she'd go back to being the perfect assistant, but tonight could be hers if she took it. She hung up and stared at the ceiling for 40 straight minutes. The next day, they both showed up to the meetings looking flawless, and they spent the entire day acting like the night before never even happened. But they both knew it did, and that shared, unspoken secret had changed the vibe of every silence between them forever. Late that day, after the meetings were done, he blew past the doorway where she was organizing files. His words were a command shot over his shoulder. "Dinner, 8 o'clock, key client, be there." So she went. It was business, she told herself. The place was a small, quiet secret. The kind of spot where the food is incredible and the wine guy knows the owner. She was on time, 8 on the dot. He was there by himself. "The client?" she asked, scanning the room. Dante's face was an unreadable mask that somehow told her everything. Cancelled last minute. She froze, her eyes locked on him, on the table set for 2. And the glass of wine that was already waiting for her. This was a setup, she stated. He just tilted his head, an answer louder than any words. "You could have told me," she said. "And you wouldn't have come," he replied. "True," she admitted and sat down. The dinner turned into a real conversation, easy and straight up. No laptops in sight. It was a perfect follow-up to what started at the bar. He ordered the wine without even looking at the list, already knowing what she'd like. A dry joke he made about the Milan exec made her laugh, and he watched her with an expression she couldn't read, but it landed deep inside her, heavy and real. Halfway through dinner, his hand moved to her face unhurried, his thumb brushing her cheek so lightly she almost thought she imagined it, but the heat it left was undeniable. "You have a smile," he murmured in that low voice he used for things meant to be felt, not heard, "that you hide at work." She said nothing. She couldn't. She still thinks about it. His hand then slid down her neck, his fingertips drawing a slow, deliberate line to her shoulder. From day one, the warmth of his hand through her dress was a solid presence, impossible to ignore. She used every ounce of self-control to keep her face neutral, though she was pretty sure he was reading her mind anyway. "Dante," she said. Her voice came out wrong, lower, weaker. He answered, his hand not moving an inch. "You're doing this on purpose?" "Yes," he said, with zero hesitation. "I am." The raw honesty of it completely disarmed her. This wasn't some kind of game. This was a man who was finished pretending. He pulled his hand back slowly, and she spent the rest of dinner trying to get her breathing back to normal. In the car back to the hotel, the silence between them was completely different, charged and knowing. They both knew where this road was going, and neither one of them was pretending anymore. And in that dead silence, a wild intimacy sparked up, totally unexpected. The car pulls up to the hotel, and he just sits there, frozen. I check him out. He stares right back. And that ironclad control he's always got. That wall, it's got a crack in it. I could literally see the dude behind the mask. Not the ice-cold boss, not the calculating Don. Just a man. I bail out of the car. He follows me straight to his room. Just as I'm about to say goodnight and run for my life, his hand clamps down on my wrist. He spins me around and just plants one on me. And trust me, it wasn't gentle. It was a full-on tactical strike, packed with every ounce of tension from the last 5 months. You could feel it in all the times he almost touched me, in every stare that lasted a second too long, in every silence that screamed louder than words. His mouth on mine was like a key finally finding its lock. My knees went weak instantly. My hands grabbed his suit just to stay upright, and he just goes deeper, cupping my face, his thumb on my jaw, locking me in place like he's got all the time in the world. But there's zero space left between us. He kicks open the door and pulls me in. I didn't fight it. The room was massive, dark, with all of Milan sparkling below them. I stop dead in front of the window. He slams the door shut. We see our reflections in the glass, him stalking towards me, his eyes locking with mine in the reflection before his hand lands on my waist from behind. It was a snapshot I knew was burned into my brain forever. "Alesia," he says, the first time. Not Romano. "Alesia," said in a way that just hit different. His mouth is right by my temple, his voice so warm it was like a touch. "If you want to leave—" "I don't want to leave," I shot back. And that was it. The last sane decision I made that night. Look, the Dante Viscari in that room wasn't the detached CEO or the guy in a power suit who could scare you silent. He was a man staring at me like he'd just found the holy grail he didn't even know he was looking for. He touched me with that same insane focus he gives everything, but this time it was laced with a warmth so different. It was way more dangerous than his usual cold-blooded vibe. Chapter 5. The morning after. It took me days to even compute what went down. Not the Milan hookup. That part was like annoyingly crystal clear. The real mindbender was figuring out the domino effect that came after, seeing how everything connected into a pattern that was right there the whole time. I woke up before he did. Milan was still dark, just a bunch of glitter outside the window. I just laid there, feeling the weight of what we did. Dante was on his side, his arms stretched out where I used to be, so much less of the Don, so much more of the man. I slipped out of bed, grabbed my dress, and ducked into the bathroom. By the time I came back, he was awake, propped on his elbow, staring at me with an intensity that sleep hadn't touched. "Running away," he called me out. His voice was low and scratchy, deeper than normal, and had this hint of humor I totally didn't see coming. "I have to get my stuff together," I said. "My flight's at 3:00. "I know what time the flight is," he replied. "It's 8 in the morning. Then he gets up, closes the distance, and kisses me with this slow-burn confidence of a guy who's in no hurry at all. One hand on my face, the other on my waist. The kiss just went on, completely nuking every logical reason I had to keep my distance and go back to being his perfect assistant. Later, at some old bistro, Dante showed a side of himself I'd never seen, a kind of chill that had no business in a boardroom. He actually asked about me, not the job. When I brought up a meeting, he actually laughed. A real laugh, something I'd maybe seen twice in 5 months, and every time, it did something weird to my insides. At the airport and on the plane, we were back to work, his arm brushing mine. It was just enough to be on purpose, but casual enough that you couldn't call him on it. When the car stopped at my place, he got out too. He waited while I unlocked my gate. And when I turned to say goodnight, he was way too close for just words. He kissed me again, shorter this time, quieter, his hand on my cheek for a second before letting go. Then he stepped back and said in that low voice I now knew way too well, "See you tomorrow, Romano." And then he was gone. I walked into my apartment, coat still in my hand, and just stood in the hallway for a hot minute, feeling something I couldn't name, but it was warm and real, and it let me sleep with a lightness I hadn't felt in forever. I had no clue that was the last time I'd see that version of him. The next morning, I got to the office at the usual time. Dante was there, dark suit, coffee, papers out, posture on lockdown, face blank, eyes on the page. Exactly like day one. It was like the last 5 months, like Milan, like the kiss on my sidewalk. None of it ever happened. He looked up when I walked in, giving me that quick boss-to-employee scan, totally stripped of all the heat it had a few days ago. "Romano, last week's report has an error in the third quarter projection." That's it? No pause, no change in his voice, nothing to even hint that we were anything more than boss and assistant. I just stood there for 2 seconds. The longest 2 seconds of my life, feeling the floor just get ripped out from under me. I walked in, sat down, and flipped open my laptop. "I'll have it corrected by 11 o'clock. "By 10, he snapped, his eyes already back on the documents. And that was it. I spent the day on autopilot, the robot version of me that just gets stuff done, while my actual brain tried to process the epic mind game. I fixed the report, handled his schedule, answered every email like a pro. When I left at 7 that night, he didn't even look up. In the restaurant bathroom meeting Sophia, I stared at myself in the mirror for 5 minutes, trying to figure out if I was still in one piece. I wasn't convinced. "I'm just another notch on his belt," I finally said, plopping down across from her. "Alizia," she started, clearing her throat. "No." I shut it down, gripping my glass, ending the topic before it could get any worse. "It was one night. It's done. I'm moving on." Sophia just gave me that look, the one that says 1,000 things, deciding if she should push it. She didn't. She just refilled her glass and hung out till midnight without saying his name again, which is Sophia's way of showing she's got my back. I moved on, or at least I tried to. An ice wall went up, not on purpose, but purely for survival. It's what you do when you have to kill an emotion you never asked for. Our talks were strictly business. No more loaded pauses, none of that extra attention I didn't even realize I was giving him. Dante totally clocked the change. I'd see him pause mid-sentence, just studying me for a sec before moving on. His face a total mask. I refused to read anymore. I thought he didn't care. I was so wrong. What I didn't know was that the night wasn't just a one-off for him either, that he was the one staring at his ceiling, completely lost, and did what guys like him always do. He built a fortress. While we were both waiting, something inside me was changing, making it impossible to pretend it was nothing. Chapter 6. Lorenzo finds out the sickness hit in the 6th week after Milan. I told myself it was stress, a perfect excuse for my body going haywire. I blamed it on some new coffee brand. I blamed it on the insane workload from a new project that had me stuck at the office super late. I had a whole list of excuses I kept cycling through for days, but the nausea wouldn't quit. On a Tuesday, I grabbed a test from a pharmacy 2 blocks from the office and used it in the bathroom on my lunch break. I just sat in the stall holding toilet paper for no reason while 2 minutes dragged on like a death sentence. 2 lines. I didn't freak out. Alicia Romano does not freak out. It was one of the few things I knew for sure about myself, and it held up even in that corporate bathroom. I stared at the 2 lines, my brain buffering, trying to process what my eyes already saw. Then I wrapped up the test, stuck it in my purse, washed my hands, and met my own eyes in the mirror. The woman looking back seemed the same. Power blazer, straight posture, controlled face. But I could see something in her eyes. It was the start of a hurricane that was about to make landfall sooner or later. No matter what, I had to bounce. I slung my bag over my shoulder, my mind already in survival mode. But then, right on cue, Lorenzo shows up at my apartment unannounced, just like when we were kids. He's holding a container of food like it's the most normal thing in the world, 'cause my man knows I don't eat when I'm stressing. "Heated this up for you," he says, breezing past me like he pays rent here too. "You never eat when you're worried." I'm glued to the sofa, laptop open, and just spit out the 3 standard lies. "I'm fine, don't worry. I ate lunch." Lorenzo just stares me down for a solid 30 seconds, not saying a word. "See, we've got that sibling, ESP. He knows my tells better than I do. After 3 decades, you don't need words. You can read a whole novel in the way someone holds a plastic container." His eyes basically screamed, "I know your life is a dumpster fire, just spit it out already." He finally asks, "What is it?" And I shoot back with, "It's nothing, Alicia. I'm fine, Lorenzo." So he just puts the food down, sits next to me, and gently yoinks the laptop off my lap. He didn't even have to force it. The guy just clears the way for the inevitable truth bomb. The silence was his superpower. He wasn't leaving until he got the story. And man, did I give it to him. It wasn't pretty. The words just came tumbling out, a total chaotic mess tracking the whole disaster. The night in Milan, the airport coffee, that kiss on the curb, the office drama the next day, and that bogus report from the 3rd quarter. I laid out the months of his cold shoulder, which I'd chalked up to him just not caring. And then, the grand finale, the bathroom on Tuesday, the 2 lines on the stick. When I finished, Lorenzo went absolutely still. It's a look I know all too well. It's not calm, it's him bottling up a freaking hurricane. It's the look that says he's about to do something, but he's waiting for me to finish first. He gets up, walks to the window, and just stares down at the street. Then he hits me with it. "I warned you." Just 2 words, but they weren't throwing blame. There was no "I told you so" in his voice, just the raw pain of a guy who wished he'd been wrong. He said it low, his back to me, looking like he was carrying the weight of the world. "I know," was all I could say back. "This man," he started, but I cut him off. "Lorenzo." My voice was sharp, a clear signal. "I made my choice too. Don't you dare turn me into some damsel in distress." He spun around, his eyes a freaking storm of anger, hurt, and something else I couldn't quite read. It looked like guilt, a guilt that made no sense to me, something he was carrying that he wasn't ready to talk about. He came back to the couch and threw his arm around me in that classic Lorenzo hug, the one he uses when words just won't cut it. The fact that he was speechless said everything. We just sat like that for a while, my head on his shoulder, his arm a solid weight while the city buzzed on outside, totally oblivious that our entire world was about to implode. "What's your next move?" he finally asked. His voice was different, softer, like a brother who was actually asking, not telling. "Still figuring it out," I mumbled. He nodded, then went quiet again before dropping the big one. "Are you going to tell him?" "No," I shot back, no hesitation. That answer had been locked and loaded since Tuesday. Lorenzo's lips tightened into a thin line. He didn't fight me on it, not yet. I know my brother. He was just putting a pin in that argument for later. We sat there for another 2 hours. He popped open the food container, put a fork in my hand with a look that said, "You're eating this." And we sat in comfortable silence. Sometimes, once the heavy stuff is out, you don't need to talk. But when he was leaving, he held me at the door, the hug lasting way longer than usual. And some small part of me knew this felt like a goodbye. Not forever, but the kind someone gives right before they go do something they know you're gonna hate. I closed the door and just stood there, completely alone. I had no clue what was coming. The truth was about to hit me like a freight train, but only after the wreckage was already there. Chapter 7. The confrontation. My brother went to do the one thing I couldn't, and Dante Viscari was about to get a reality check no one else had the guts to give him. I was totally in the dark, staring at my glowing laptop, trying to write the perfect resignation letter. Meanwhile, Lorenzo was storming across the city, walking straight into the Viscari Holdings tower with no appointment, no permission, and 0 Fs to give. I heard the story later, first from Marco, who gave me the cliff notes weeks later, and then from Lorenzo himself, who owned every second of it. He walked up to reception and said he had urgent personal business. He dropped his last name with the kind of confidence that makes people listen. And it worked. Marco Vital, upstairs, heard the name Romano and, on a gut feeling, greenlit the visit. Dante only agreed to see him because a screaming match in his 5-star lobby was not on his agenda. It was a cold, calculated move. The office was dead silent when Lorenzo walked in. Dante was already on his feet behind his desk. Marco saw him stand the second the name Romano came over the intercom, like a man bracing for impact. But Lorenzo strolled in without a hint of fear. The billion-dollar suit, the penthouse view, the death stare that had probably shattered lesser men, none of it touched him. He learned on the streets that you never let another man's power make you forget your own. "You know who I am," Lorenzo stated. "I do," Dante shot back, his voice low and calm, the kind of calm that's more terrifying than a shout. "Sit." I'd rather stand. A heavy pause filled the room. Dante leaned against his desk, crossing his arms, giving Lorenzo his full, undivided attention. My brother later said he could feel that focus like a physical force. Then he dropped the bomb. "My sister is pregnant with your child." The words just hung there. Dante didn't flinch. He didn't say a thing. Marco knew his boss. That stillness wasn't indifference. It was a man barely containing an internal earthquake. Lorenzo didn't let up, his voice getting harder. "And you're over here acting like she's just another employee who's going to quit and disappear." When Dante tried to interrupt, Lorenzo shut him down instantly. "Romano has a name," he snapped, his voice firm. "Alessia, and she is not okay." Dante went silent again. "She isn't sleeping," Lorenzo continued. "She isn't eating. She is carrying this all by herself while you do what? Sign contracts, stare out your window, and hope this whole problem just vanishes? You don't know what you're talking about." I know everything about men like you. Lorenzo let that hang in the air for a second before delivering the kill shot. You act like you own everything, the office, the decisions, the people. But the second it's time to take some real responsibility, you retreat. You go back to being the cold boss, waiting for the world to fix itself around you. And Dante just stood there and took it, completely silent. This wasn't the quiet of a man plotting his next move. This was the silence of someone getting hit with a truth bomb for the very first time, from a guy who had nothing left to lose. Lorenzo faced the door, hand on the handle, timing his exit line like a pro. She said for you, it was just one night, he said, his voice dropping low, not even looking at him. That she was just another one. He paused. If that's the truth, tell me now. At least I'll know to take care of her myself instead of waiting on you. And you could just feel it. Lorenzo was on the edge of spilling everything. The text he'd been getting, the debt that was out of control, the name that was stamped on every single collection notice, a name he clocked way too late, but he choked it all back down. He bounced, leaving a ticking bomb I wouldn't understand until everything had already gone sideways. Dante was left alone in the room. Marco slid in 2 minutes later, like clockwork after a big scene, with the silent precision of a guy who's mastered the art of when to enter and when to stay the hell out. He saw his boss and kept his mouth shut. Dante was at the window, his go-to spot for processing the insane. The city below was just a machine, either putting things in focus or making the room feel even more empty. Get out, he said. Marco was gone, and for the first time in a long, long time, years if he was being real, Dante Viscari was trapped alone with the truth of who he really was. He was cornered by the words of a man with 0 F's to give, who only spoke facts, leaving no room for a prettier story. You act like you own everything, but when it's time to answer for it, you bail. He thought of Elysia, of that morning in Milan when he threw on the boss armor because he had no clue how to be the man who was just in her bed. Because being that guy meant admitting what went down. And admitting that meant admitting he was completely lost. And being lost was a state of being Dante Viscari had spent his whole life avoiding with a discipline he'd mistaken for strength. He thought about the past few months, about watching her pull away, the Elysia who stopped hanging around, whose words got clipped and whose stare got hard, the distance between them a carefully managed project. He'd chalked it up to her decision, a boundary he had to respect, the kind of wall a guy who doesn't know how to ask can never get over. If you wait for her to come to you, you'll wait forever. He already knew that. He knew it before Lorenzo even said a word. He knew it with that gut punch clarity of seeing your own toxic pattern you can't deny anymore. And yet he'd done nothing, just stood on his side of the divide, waiting for something else to fix it. His suit was flawless. His office was perfect. The city below just kept on moving, not giving a damn. Dante stood at that window for a long time. Then in total silence, he made the decision. Not to run to her, not to fix anything yet, but the one decision that comes before all that. The decision to stop pretending, to stop acting like what he felt was under control, like it was temporary, like it would just vanish if he ignored it long enough, it didn't disappear. It hadn't disappeared for months. And get this, Elysia Romano was about to walk into that room with a letter in her hand. He knew it with the kind of certainty you have when you know someone so well you can predict their next play. She thought she was coming to end it. She was dead wrong. Chapter 8. Like it or not, you're staying. I walked in to resign. He told me I was pregnant before I could even get a word out. And then he said something that flipped the entire script. The letter was folded in my bag for 3 days, written on Friday, edited on Saturday, reread on Sunday, with the cold logic of someone checking their work. And it was solid. My resignation gave 2 weeks' notice right by the contract. The reason was personal, vague on purpose, because I didn't owe anyone a truth I wasn't ready to put on paper. It was a perfect letter, polite, to the point, and final. I knew how to write them. The words weren't the hard part. Walking through his door was. I put it off for 3 days, making up excuses, waiting for a gap in his schedule, waiting for the guts to face him without my face giving me away. 3 days of riding the elevator to the 10th floor, letter in my bag, only to leave with it still hidden. It was a failure of nerve, pure and simple. On Monday, I woke up with the sharp, cold feeling of a choice that had to be made before I chickened out again. I hit the office at the usual time, said hi to Carla, and poured my coffee. The same perfect blend that showed up daily, a routine I kept up to dodge the questions I'd get if I stopped. Explanations were what I was running from. I held the mug in the hall, staring at his closed door and taking one last wobbly breath before I went in. Dante was at the window with his back to me, his shoulders massive in a dark, perfect suit, but something about his stance made me pause. This wasn't a guy just staring out the window. This was the posture of a man who was waiting, who knew I was there and chose to stay turned away, pulling that same psycho-level control he had over everything. "I need to speak with you," I said. He turned. He locked his eyes on me for a silent beat. I had every single one of his looks memorized, but this one had a different kind of heat. It wasn't his boss look or the look from Milan. It was a look I had never seen, and not knowing what it meant was freaking me out because I thought I'd seen them all. I pulled out the letter, holding it tight with both hands like someone who knew what they were doing, and announced, "I'm resigning. 2 weeks' notice," as we agreed. The silence that followed was so heavy, you could feel it. Dante didn't reach for the letter. He didn't even look at it. He just stood there, his eyes glued to me, and said, "Reason, personal, Romano." His voice went ice cold. It didn't get louder, but it got this steel edge that meant the professional stuff was over. This was something else, a reason I didn't need to give one. "You're pregnant." The quiet after that bombshell lasted for 6 full seconds. My brain counted every one of them while the rest of me was just completely short-circuiting. I didn't confirm it, didn't deny it. I just stood there, letter in hand, as those seconds dropped like anvils. The world had just been flipped upside down, and I felt it with a clarity that came before any emotion. "How do you know?" It wasn't really a question, just the only sentence I could string together, my voice a total whisper. His silence was the only answer I needed. "Lorenzo." The name popped into my head with the sick feeling of seeing your own brother's signature on a betrayal. That hug, it was a goodbye that meant so much more. Lorenzo had left, and I'd been so lost in my own head, I completely missed what was happening right in front of me. Dante started walking across the room. His pace wasn't rushed, but it was deliberate. Every step loaded with intent, not doubt. It was the walk of a man who knows he's already won. He stopped right in front of me, way too close for the office, way too close for anything casual. The space between us vanished until every nerve in my body was screaming about his presence. I lifted my chin. The letter was still in my hand, the only thing in the universe I could control. "I don't want to stay here anymore," I said, my voice strong because it had to be. "You have a life. I have mine." Dante stayed silent, his eyes locked on me. Not the paper, not the letter. Me. He looked at me with an intensity I knew was the realest version of him, the one that broke through when his insane control slipped, showing what was underneath. And then he said, "Like it or not." Each word was placed with a heavy, deliberate calm. "You're staying." I opened my mouth to fight back. "This baby is mine." 4 words. 4 words delivered in a low, absolute tone that wasn't a threat or a plea. It was a statement of fact, the kind of certainty that doesn't need you to agree with it. It was the voice of a man who had already decided how things were going to be and was now just laying out the new reality. I stared at him, and he stared back. In his eyes was something I'd never seen in any version of him. It wasn't the boss, or the guy from Milan, or the cold-ass wall he'd put up. It was something that existed before all of that. Something much deeper. It was the Dante Viscari that existed without any armor. The man I saw a glimpse of once and figured I'd never see again. The letter in my hand suddenly felt both useless and 100 pounds heavier. Useless because the world it was written for was already gone. Heavier because I was still holding on, not sure if I could let it go. "You can't just," I started. "I'm not just anything," he cut me off, not harshly, but with that bluntness that was his twisted version of being honest. "I'm stating what is." "What is?" I shot back, my voice cracking in a way I totally didn't plan. And boom, you see the crack in his armor, the kind of break you get from holding it all together for way too long. She hits him with it. "You vanished. You treated me like I was just some random employee, and now—" He cuts her off. "I know what I did." Just 3 words. No defense, no excuses, none of that garbage people spew to make themselves feel better. Just the raw, uncut truth. She clamps her mouth shut, throat tight, but she'll be damned if she lets him see it. "This fixes nothing," she says. "No," he agrees, "but it's where we start." The air between them is thick with all of Milan that morning after, and 6 straight months of a silence neither of them had the guts to break. And that silence had a price tag she was only now starting to read. It was all right there, in the space between her defiant chin and his dead serious eyes. The letter was still clutched in her hand. Dante's eyes flick to it for a split second, then snap right back to her face. He doesn't ask for it, doesn't pressure her. He just stands there, too damn close, too solid, too real, and waits. And this new patience hits different than his old-school control ever did. I should bounce. I know I have to. I've got the letter, my own apartment 20 minutes from here, and a life I built from scratch that doesn't need a man to keep it running. I know all this, even with him staring me down, and yet I'm still here. Not because he said so, not because the past is magically gone or his months of ghosting me just evaporated. I'm staying because the truth he just dropped, "This baby is mine," was delivered with a finality my body understood before my brain could even catch up. And because for the first time in forever, Dante Viscari finally dropped the act. Chapter 9. The Snatching. They grabbed me on a totally normal day, the day all the skeletons came sprinting out of the closet. After that throwdown in the office, I stuck around for weeks telling myself I was trapped with the kind of stubbornness you have when you're arguing with your own dumb heart. I stayed because he made leaving impossible, which is not the same as wanting to stay, and definitely not the same as admitting that letter I'd been holding for 3 days was never getting delivered. The vibe between us switched to this fragile, careful dance, built on what he said in that office and everything we left hanging in the air, a tightrope we both knew was being tested every single day. It was a Thursday when Lorenzo showed up at the door, looking like a ghost of the guy he used to be. That easy, charming grin was now a cheap, strained knockoff. He had dark circles under his eyes like craters. His shirt was a wrinkled mess, a tiny detail so out of character it screamed that he was barely holding it together. I saw it in the first 30 seconds. I knew this man too well. The red flags had been popping up for weeks. The sketchy phone calls, the evasiveness about his cash flow, the temporary apartment that was now his home for 3 months. I'd let it slide, a decision I was seriously starting to regret. The debts, I said, no sugarcoating it. Did it get worse? I'm dealing with it, he shot back. But the words were clipped, defensive, not his usual vibe at all. His eyes darted away for a second before locking with mine again. I held his gaze. Lorenzo, tell me what the hell is going on. This isn't your problem to carry. His tone was harsh, a massive departure from his normal chill demeanor. But you need to be safe, you hear me? Pay attention to everything, in the car, around people, just be on high alert. You're freaking me out. I'm being smart. He gave me a look I'd seen before, the one he saved for when things got deadly serious. Promise me you'll be vigilant. I promised, not really getting why, but knowing he didn't make requests like this for fun. His voice left zero room for argument. This was bad. I wouldn't get it until way later, when all the messed up pieces of the puzzle clicked into place that he was already drowning. He'd gotten the threats, the insane demands, and then a picture of me, snapped from a distance, leaving work. Underneath it, a stone-cold caption. We know what she means to you both. He never said a word. He carried that nightmare alone, like always, thinking he could stop the storm before it hit me. My doctor's visit was totally routine. The car waiting for me outside the clinic was a perfect clone of Dante's. Same make, same color, with the exact license plate I knew by heart. A detail that perfect isn't an accident. It's a goddamn masterpiece of planning, fed by an insider giving them every single detail. It takes time, cash, and a flawless execution. The driver's wave looked totally normal as I got closer. He opened the door, saying my name like he'd said it 1,000 times. I slid inside. But the second I sat down, I knew. The smell was wrong. It wasn't the usual leather or that specific air freshener Dante's guy always used. The seat fabric felt a little off, a detail no one else would ever notice. But I knew that car. My mouth opened to say something, but the chance was gone. It was fast, clean, done with the chillingly smart idea that perfection goes unnoticed. While a chaotic scene just draws attention, they stole the one thing Dante always had on his side: time to react. I came to, tied to a chair. The room was tiny, the air was heavy. A dim, artificial light gave no hint what time it was. My hands were roped behind me, the knots tied by a pro, sending a clear message that these guys were not amateurs. Facing total disaster, I went back to basics. I started counting. 3 dudes in sight, more pacing outside the door. I could map the layout from the sounds bouncing off the walls. No windows, one door locked from the outside. The place was climate-controlled, professional, not some crappy warehouse. And then my mind snapped to the child. I could feel its presence inside me, the only part of this hellhole that was mine. And I held on to that thought like it was my last breath before hitting the water. One slow breath, then another. I used the same trick I'd perfected over a lifetime of handling my own crap. It worked like it always did. Not perfect, but good enough. My thoughts went to Dante, not with some fairy tale hope of a princess needing a hero, but with the ice-cold certainty of someone who gets a man so completely she can call his next move, "This baby is mine." A man who says those words with that tone doesn't walk away from what's his. This wasn't hope. It was strategy. And it gave me the calm I needed. At 2 p.m, Lorenzo's phone lit up with a second picture. It showed me in that chair, wrists tied but alive. Unhurt but 100% a hostage. Below the photo, one single terrifying order. "You know who has our money. Go to him now. We're watching everything." And Lorenzo ran. He tore through the city, phone gripped in his hand, that image burning into the screen. He busted into Viscari Holdings, breathing like a man who'd just been crushed by the weight of the world. Marco saw his eyes, saw the pure desperation, and just led him upstairs, no questions asked. Dante was at the window when Lorenzo stumbled in. He turned, and the agony on the brother's face made his whole body go rigid in a way Marco had almost never seen. "Speak," Dante commanded, and the whole ugly story came pouring out. He told him absolutely everything. About the threats, the demands, the debt that had gotten way too big to handle, and the gut punch of realizing his lenders worked for Victor Srokin. He confessed about the first picture of Alicia, the one he'd kept hidden for weeks, stupidly thinking he could fix it all on his own. And then he told him about today's picture. "I never thought they would use her," Lorenzo choked out, his voice finally shattering. "I swear to God, I never saw this coming." Dante said nothing. Lorenzo would later say that silence was the heaviest thing he had ever felt. It wasn't anger. It was way, way scarier. It was the absolute self-control of a man holding back a tidal wave of fury, a calm that was costing him everything. Then the phone on his desk started to ring. The number was blocked. Dante snatched the receiver before the second ring, his movement smooth, certain. He knew exactly who it was. On the line was a voice soaked in a cold, fake calm, the kind people use like a weapon. "Dante Viscari." A calculated pause. "I believe you're now aware of the girl's current residence." Dante stayed quiet. His silence was his answer. "Lorenzo Romano turned out to be the perfect pawn," Victor said, his tone flat with the pleasure of a scheme going off without a hitch. "His debt was our way in. His sister was our leverage. And you." Another pause. "You were our endgame." Dante tilted his head toward the window, his jaw set like stone. "The terms are simple," Victor continued. "You sign over the territory we want. You give up the access. You eat all of Romano's debt. Do all that, and you get her back." The offer was impossible, not because of the money, but because of the power shift it represented between their organizations. It was a surrender Dante would never, ever consider, no matter how bad the pressure, no matter what the threat. With one single exception. "You have 2 hours," Victor warned. "After that, the price goes up, and I can't guarantee her condition or the child's." The call ended. The silence that filled that office was a whole new level of terrifying, something Marco had never experienced in all his years with Dante. It wasn't rage. It was the thing that comes before it, something darker, more lethal. It was the silent explosion inside a man who had spent his entire life protecting his family, now facing the nightmare of being too late. Lorenzo stood there, pale as a ghost, his eyes finally seeing the true catastrophic size of his screw-up. "Dante," he whispered, his voice broken, "I never knew." "I know," Dante shot back, his voice low and sharp, but without any blame. He was already up, already moving. His decision made the second Victor thought he had 2 hours to play with. Marco would later talk about the next 2 hours with the short, clipped words of a man who refused to ever think about that memory again. Dante didn't sign a single thing. He gave up zero leverage. He hit up 3 contacts Marco wouldn't dare name, and I didn't even ask. In under 40 minutes, my dude had the warehouse location, a body count for the goons inside, and confirmed Victor was a lone wolf running a scam without his crew's backup. It was a bluff using borrowed muscle, and Dante, a guy who sniffs out fake threats for a living, took apart the whole operation before Victor's 2-hour deadline was even a thing. I only got the warehouse story in bits and pieces. No shots were fired. Dante's squads hit from 3 sides at once. Apparently, Victor got a call from his actual boss mid-op, and whatever was said made him peace out right before Dante rolled up. After that, total silence. A dead quiet slammed down on the warehouse. The first thing I noticed was the lack of noise I'd gotten used to. Shuffling feet, muffled talking, a creaky chair. It's like someone hit the mute button on the world. This new silence wasn't empty. It was thick with the energy of a place stitched in a hurry, a vibe you can feel in your gut. Something outside had just gone down, but for better or worse, I had no clue, and not knowing was pure acid. I stayed completely still, slowed my breathing, and put all my focus on the tiny life inside me. That precious weight was my only anchor, and I clung to it, waiting with the kind of grit a woman has when there's no other option but to survive. Seconds turned into minutes, and every single one felt like a lifetime until that door finally blasted open. Dante walked in first, a lone shadow in a dark suit, his shoulders set. I know his walk like my own pulse, but this was different. It was fast but not rushed. It was the calculated, on-a-mission stride of a man executing a flawless game plan he'd already run 1,000 times in his head. In less than 2 seconds, his eyes tore the room apart before they found me, and boom, they locked on. It wasn't relief I felt at first. It was deeper, more raw, the look in a man's eyes who was prepped for hell and was now rebooting his brain to process reality. Me, breathing, me in one piece. My hand on my stomach, my stare locked on his, even with my wrists tied to a chair. Because Elysia Romano never looks away. He crossed the room without a word and dropped to one knee. That single move, Dante Viscari kneeling, hit with a force that just shattered my composure before I could even try to block it. His hands went straight for the ropes on my wrists, sharp and fast, and the knots basically surrendered on sight. The second the ropes were gone, he just swallowed my hands with his. He wasn't even squeezing, just holding them, a warmth so intense it felt like something I'd been starving for without realizing it. His eyes did a full tactical sweep of my body, a cold, desperate search for injuries from hours of picturing the absolute worst. He was still fighting ghosts of things that never happened. "You're okay," he whispered, mostly to himself, like saying it out loud would make it stick. I am, I said back. His hand came up to my face, his thumb tracing my cheek, his eyes finally meeting mine. And deep inside them, I saw a weakness I'd never seen in any version of him before. This wasn't the boss or that disconnected guy from Milan. This wasn't the fortress he'd built around himself, a wall that was already turning to dust. This was the man underneath, stripped of all the armor, laid bare by the clock ticking down the last few hours, making any kind of act impossible. The moment was gone in a flash. He stood up, hands on my waist, helping me to my feet. He paused right in front of me, just soaking me in, like he needed that extra second to believe I was really whole. In the car, a heavy quiet hung in the air for 2 straight minutes as I just stared out the window. He kept his eyes on the road, but the stress was still carved into his jaw, the way he held his shoulders, and now his hands were clamped onto his knee, the last signs of the war he'd just been fighting. "You were afraid?" he said, like a fact. "Yes." "Of what?" I finally turned to look at him. He didn't look back, but the question was buzzing with the need for a real answer. I could have given him a bunch of truths, the nasty warehouse, the crushing uncertainty. Any of them would have been easier, safer than the one I picked. "Of never seeing you again," I admitted. The silence after that hit different than all the others. A muscle in his jaw jumped. The hand that was on his knee moved, super slow, super deliberate, and found mine in the space between our seats. It just stayed there. He held my hand the whole ride back to his place, and neither of us said anything about it. It was one of those delicate things that grow better in silence. Dante and I had learned, the hard way, that words can sometimes cheapen what's most important. That silent conversation became more than a memory. It became a foundation. The words I'd said, my voice shaky with a terrifying truth, his silence that followed, and his hand that wouldn't let go, they were the first bricks we laid. We had no idea what we were building, but we both knew the construction had started. 3 weeks after he saved me, I was living in his apartment. It wasn't a conversation we had. It was just a slow-motion surrender of the walls I'd kept up for so long, sped up by the kidnapping, by those words in the car, and by one random afternoon when I got home to my place, went to call him on instinct, and felt the sharp sting of him not being there in a room that was supposed to be mine. I never told him about that. I just showed up with one suitcase, and he never brought up how small it was. That was our style. But a language without words can only go so far, and we hit our limit in the second week. I woke up at 3 in the morning, to his side of the bed being cold. I found him by the living room window, phone in hand, with that same closed-off look of the guy I first met. He was locked down on a whole other planet I couldn't get to. When I asked what was wrong, he shot back a clipped, "Work." It was the same tone from before Milan, a clear sign the door was slammed shut. I went back to our room and stared at the ceiling till sunrise, wondering if I'd made a colossal mistake. The breaking point was a fight over Lorenzo's treatment, all because I found the bank statement. I went at him, not about him helping, but about the secrets. Hiding stuff was the exact poison that blew us up before, and if he was just running the same old plays in a new game, I had to know right now. "I paid because it had to be done," he said, his voice totally flat. "You hid it because that's what you do," I snapped. The silence that followed was that old, choking kind I refused to drown in again. After a long beat, he finally talked, and I could see the struggle in his jaw before I heard it. "I don't know how to be different yet," he confessed. "But I'm trying." It was a tiny offering, but it was real. And I was starting to get that with Dante. Honesty was the only thing that could actually grow. Lorenzo was at a clinic for dudes who'd lost everything to gambling, a place that gave him the rules he needed to break the habit. He went on his own for the first time ever, a thing I was still trying to process weeks later. Lorenzo was always the fixer, the guy who carried everyone's crap with a fake smile and hugs that lasted a little too long. This new version of him, the one who admitted he was broken, was someone I was learning to see through a fog of both relief and pain, the kind you feel when you know help only showed up because the alternative was game over. I visited him every Tuesday, a quiet, steady presence, because I knew my brother needed a reliable routine more than big speeches. Dante was paying for all of it. I found out by a total fluke, a statement in the wrong folder with the clinic's name and his signature. I just stared at the paper, a warmth sparking inside me that I wouldn't dare name. Naming it would mean accepting it, and I wasn't that brave yet. I didn't say a word. He didn't say a word. It was our language. Things passed between us without being spoken, which sometimes felt like not enough and sometimes felt like everything. One Wednesday night, he got home and found me on the balcony. The city was laid out below us, buildings outlined in gold against a purple sky. I was looking out, hands on the rail, the little curve of my pregnancy finally showing. A deep calm had settled over the evening, a kind of quiet I'd almost forgotten existed. I heard the door, his footsteps, a sound I now knew by heart in all its forms. I recognized the specific walk he had when he was looking for me before he did anything else. He stopped at the edge of the balcony, just watching me for a second, and in his far-off look, I saw something I could feel but couldn't name. It was the look of a dude seeing something totally unexpected, and he just had to stop and process it. He rolled up, standing so close to her, their arms were practically touching. For the first time in what felt like forever, the silence wasn't heavy. It was chill. This wasn't the awkward quiet of unspoken drama, but the easy vibe of two people just existing in the same space. "Lorenzo called," she dropped. "I know. He said he hit you up before everything went down." A beat passed. "Said you were pissed," she added. I was, but he wasn't wrong. Dante turned, and his whole guard was down, a look she had never seen on him. Ever. This wasn't the mob boss, the slick charmer, or the guy in a suit who owned every room he entered. This was a man whose pain-in-the-ass brother forced him to look in the mirror, and weeks later, he was still shook. "He has a terrible way of saying the right things," Dante grumbled. A laugh just burst out of her, the kind you can't hold back. He watched her with that look, the one that screamed he was banking this memory, saving a thought he couldn't say out loud yet. The silence after wasn't weird, it was the destination. "I was an idiot," he said flat out, no shields up like people usually have for big screw-ups. "With you." After that night in Milan, she knew how she felt, so she built a massive wall because it was easier than dealing with the chaos. "It wasn't," she mumbled. "It wasn't," he agreed. "You never said a word." "I know." His eyes stayed locked on hers. "I let you think you were just another conquest, because what I felt was terrifying and I had zero words for it. So I did the only thing I know how when I'm out of moves." "You built a wall," she finished for him. "I built a wall," he admitted, totally exposed. This was the raw honesty he only pulled out when the stakes were highest. "That can't just erase the last few months," she told him. "No," he conceded, "but it's the truth. And you deserve that more than anything." He pulled something from his pocket. It was low-key, not the kind of bling that screams for attention. It was a simple, dark gold band that looked like it had seen some things. She'd find out later it was a copy of his mother's ring, his only frame of reference for this kind of move, and that he'd stressed over picking it more than any decision all year. He held it out, but he didn't kneel. That wasn't his style, and she wouldn't want that anyway. A kneeling Dante would be a total fake, and this moment had to be 100% real. "I don't know how to do this," he confessed, his voice low, a tone so unique to this one guy in this 1 second it could never be repeated. "I have no clue how to be with someone without turning it into a power play. I don't know how to love in a way that doesn't scare them. And me." She let him talk. "But I did learn something." His gaze drilled into hers with that hardcore intensity that was his signature move. "The only time I've ever been truly afraid was when you were gone. I was basically holding my breath, not sure I'd make it in time." "You counted," she whispered. "Every single one." The truth didn't hit her like a truck. It washed over her the way epic revelations do, slow and undeniable. Dante Viscari, a man whose entire life was about control, keeping his distance, and never needing anyone, had been counting every single minute. He didn't jam the ring on her finger. He placed it in her open hand, a slow, deliberate move. It was the difference between an order and an ask, between choosing for her and letting her call the shot. "Stay," he said, "not for my kid. Not because I said so, because I am asking you." "You hate asking," she pointed out. "I do," he admitted, so honest it was almost funny. "This is as close as you get to a proposal, huh?" "For now," he shot back, with a new kind of humor she'd never heard from him before, one that was showing up as his walls came down. "I guess you could get better with practice." She laughed, a real, light-hearted laugh that only happens with the right person. He watched her with that same look from the bistro in Milan, a look she finally understood. It was the face of a man realizing he wanted to see that exact thing for the rest of his life. She slid the ring onto her own finger. "You'll need a whole lot of practice," she told him. His hand went to her stomach, slow and careful, with a gentleness that was still new to him, but a price he was clearly willing to pay. His hand just rested there, a warm, solid weight over the spot where their kid was growing, completely oblivious to the drama fest that was its parents. "We have time," he said. "We have time." Her brother's warnings echoed in her head. Dangerous, a player, uncontrollable. He was right on all 3 points. He was only wrong about one thing. He thought it would push her away. Instead, that's exactly why she stayed. She didn't get it then, but in choosing him, she was signing up for all the chaos to come. "This is Lena, and that's book 1, but my work on book 2 is already finished. You can get access for a super small fee." The envelope had no return address. Figuring it was just business, she ripped it open, expecting another boring contract. But inside were dates, files, messages she had never seen, and one last handwritten line. The handwriting was a stranger's, but it had the chilling calm of someone who knows they're about to burn the world down. "He didn't just know about your brother's debts. He rerouted them, pushed Lorenzo down the path that got you kidnapped. Ask him why." The page slipped out of her hand. She stared at the ring, at her stomach, at the door where Dante was working, with no idea she was holding proof that the man who begged her to stay had set up the entire nightmare. Dante's rescue wasn't a rescue. He had yanked her out of a trap he'd built himself. And for the first time since she said yes, She wondered if she even belonged there. As you can guess, this is just a taste of book 2. For the full, uncensored story, you just gotta click the first link in the pinned comment. I'll see you over there in a second. Just to be clear, that top link in the comments takes you straight to the complete second book. No ads, no interruptions. It's literally that easy. I had a killer time making book 2, and because you guys were awesome, there's definitely more coming. Over there, you'll find stories that get way deeper and way steamier. This is real dark romance, because this content is way more intense. It's not something I can drop on public YouTube. This exclusive spot lets me unleash my true creative side and make my best work for you all. Quick reminder, the channel isn't monetized anymore. This project is what lets me support my crew and keep dropping these top-tier stories. I'll be sharing more updates soon. I'll be looking for you through that first link in the pinned comment. Sadly, there have been a bunch of cases of people ripping our audio, jacking the whole story, and just re-uploading it to YouTube.
Life lesson: power without emotional honesty creates a cycle of damage, even when love is real. He believed control was strength, she believed restraint was safety. Between those two beliefs, tragedy grew like a flower watered with blood. From a distance, their story appears to be about seduction, danger, and betrayal. But underneath it is really about two people trained by life to survive in opposite ways. He survived by mastering rooms, mastering silence, mastering other people before they could ever master him. She survived by mastering herself. He built control outward, she built control inward. When these two systems collided, desire did not liberate them, it exposed them. That is why the central lesson is not simply about romance. It is about the architecture of human damage. A person can love deeply and still harm the one they love if they have never learned how to be emotionally truthful. He did not fail because he felt nothing. He failed because he felt too much and chose power over vulnerability. The morning after intimacy, he retreated into the role he understood best, the untouchable man behind the desk. In doing so, he transformed affection into confusion and closeness into humiliation. This is the old cycle of violence in a more elegant costume. No fists, no screaming, just emotional withdrawal used as armor. And armor, however noble it looks, still cuts the person forced to hold it. She, meanwhile, interpreted his silence in the cruelest way possible, as proof that she had meant less than she believed. That is another enduring human truth. Where communication is absent, pain writes its own explanation, and pain is rarely generous. Her brother functions almost like a moral witness in the story. He sees what both of them refuse to articulate. He understands that danger does not always look like evil. Sometimes it looks like a damaged man who has mistaken dominance for maturity. His warning matters because it recognizes an uncomfortable fact. Charisma without emotional accountability is not romance. It is a storm with good tailoring. The story ultimately suggests a final lesson that extends far beyond Mafia fiction. Love does not become healthy when it becomes intense. It becomes healthy when truth enters the room before fear does. Until then, every gesture, every rescue, every confession is merely trying to repair damage that honesty could have prevented.